Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Human Capital Watch by the Conference Board. I'm Amy Yi, Research Associate of Human Capital Group. Very excited to be here. Thank you so much for joining us. I have two guest speakers with me today. Robyn Erickson, Human Capital Principal Researcher of the Conference Board, and Camarillo, VP of Talent Development at Quicken Loans. We are thrilled to be here to explore with you this important topic. How can organizations build highly engaged teams? So companies today are facing a lot of changes, both externally and internally. In order to address those massive changes, companies need to have more collaboration, more innovation, higher levels of productivity and efficiency. So working in teams has turned out to be an effective and economical way for organizations to achieve these purposes and get work done. So today we'll be sharing some research findings from the Conference Board most recent in order to enhance organizational and team effectiveness. So here are some critical questions that we will be covering today. The first is, what does a highly engaged team look like? So what are some critical elements that a highly engaged team must have in order to thrive? And second, what are some effective practices that can help organizations to create and sustain deeply engaged teams? And what are some common practices that organizations are already using? And the third is about measurement. So metrics to measure have become increasingly important as more and more organizations are trying to demonstrate the ROI, the business impact of their engagement efforts. So how can an organization properly measure whether a team is engaged or not? What are some metrics they can use? And last but definitely not least, our guest speaker, Komari, will share stories and the different initiatives that Quicken Loans have taken to foster high levels of engagement and effectiveness of their teams. So before we get started, I'd like to mention a few housekeeping items about how to participate in today's webcast. So first of all, the presentation is available for download via the file download pod on your screen. And we really want to make today's webcast an interactive session. So if you have questions and comments at any time during the webcast, please feel free to type them in the chat box on your screen. And we will try to address some of them throughout the course of the program. But if we are not able to cover everything in real time, we will leave a few minutes at the end of the program to address them all together. And we encourage our attendees to exchange ideas and perspectives among yourselves as well, as we often find that attendees not only learn from the researchers and guest speakers, but also from each other during the show. So your feedback is really important to us. We will send out a short evaluation at the end of the webcast. So please feel free to share any suggestions and comments with us so that we can better suit your needs in the future. And today's webcast is being recorded as well. So the recording will be available on demand on the Conference Board website within 48 hours. And last, you may full screen either video or the slides by clicking the arrows at the upper right of each pod. So for those of you who are earning credits, here are a few things to keep in mind. So you must stay online for the full session in order to be eligible for the credits. And credits are only available for participation in the live webcast. Today's webcast is eligible for three credit types: CPE, HRCI, and SHRM. Make sure you type your full name, email address, and specify which credits you're taking in the space provided. Click OK for three pop-ups that occur during the program. So now I'd like to introduce my two guest speakers. The first is Robyn Erickson. Robyn is a principal researcher in the human capital practice of the Conference Board. She currently leads Employee Engagement Institute, and her main research topics include employee engagement retention, talent acquisition, talent mobility, and diversity and inclusion. Before joining the Conference Board, she was an experienced research analyst and management consultant from Deloitte Consulting. Robyn holds a PhD in organizational change from Northwestern University. Welcome, Robyn. And our next guest speaker is Camarillo. Komari is a VP of Talent Development with Quicken Loans. In her current role, she is responsible for leading her team to create sustainable and holistic development programs for all team members. This includes onboarding programs, team member development, organizational engagement, and leadership development. She has more than 20 years of experience in client service, sales, and corporate education, focused on ensuring organizations were successful. Komari holds a bachelor's degree in business from Winston University, an MBA and MAED from University of Phoenix, and an executive MSA from University of Texas, where she focused on organizational behavior and executive and professional coaching. Thank you so much for joining us, Komari. So before I hand it over to Robyn to dive into the research findings and the leading practices from our study, Komari, could you take a few minutes to just give us a quick overview of company Quicken Loans? I'm sure our members want to hear more about that.
Sure. So Quicken Loans is based in Detroit, Michigan. We have offices also in Cleveland, Arizona, North Carolina. We are the nation's largest mortgage lender, and our mission is to help citizens secure the American dream. We're very different in terms of how we operate when it comes to our team members. We have the philosophy that we love our clients and we love our people. And it's understanding that if we don't take care of our team members, it makes it darn sure hard to take care of our clients. And so with helping clients secure the American dream, we focus on providing team members with the understanding that they come to work with a greater purpose, to do things that a lot of folks aspire to do at least once in their lives. And so when you think about the organization and the fact that we do put our people first, it leads us to one of our isms, which is numbers and money follow, they do not lead. However, because we ensure that we are always thinking about how we're supporting our team members and impacting that client experience, we've been ranked the highest in the country for customer satisfaction, for being a primary mortgage originator for 9 consecutive years. We've also have been ranked for the last 5 years when it comes to mortgage servicing as well. And lastly, we have placed on the 100 Best Places to Work for 2019, and we've been included in the magazine's top 1/3 of companies that have been named to that list for the past consecutive years. And I think that's just a further testament that demonstrates when you put your people first and you think about the team member experience, you will ensure that the clients are going to be taken care of as well.
Thank you so much, Komari. So Robyn, now we can't wait to hear some findings from our research study. Please take it over.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Komari. We're looking forward to hearing more about Quicken Loans as we go through today's presentation. As Amy mentioned, we have just published this report, The DNA of Engagements, how organizations create and sustain highly engaged teams. We have been looking at engagement here at the Conference Board for the last 4 to 5 years, and I guess it's 5 years, and every year we've had a different topic. We started out with organizational culture, we looked at leadership, we looked at employees, and last year in 2018, we looked at highly engaged teams. This year, just in case you're interested in knowing what we're doing, we're looking at the intersection of engagement and inclusion. So that's our focus this year. But we wanted to share with you our most recent research looking at the DNA of engagement. On the left-hand side there, you can see the different pieces of content that are available for you on the website. There's an executive summary, there's the report, obviously. We also profiled 2 other organizations in addition to CarMax, in addition to Quicken Loans, CarMax and NASA. We've also created a diagnostic tool for your team to actually use to assess how engaged the team is and the behaviors that they might be able to do differently. And so with that, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about the survey. These were the 2 research questions, and these are the main points of research I'm going to go over today. What are the critical elements that must be in place for highly engaged teams to thrive, first of all? And then second, what can organizations do to create and sustain highly engaged teams and high-performing teams? In terms of our research methodology, we did 2 surveys. The first one was with human capital executives. We had 81 executives participate in that. And then we asked them to share the survey with their teams. So we had 450 team members participate in the survey. So as I go through the research, you'll see we have responses from leaders, from supervisors, and from employees. We also did 4 focus groups, and we did 4 company interviews. And so we have many different voices that we incorporated into this research. And wanted to start out with the definition of team engagement for you. This is how the Conference Board defines it: as a heightened emotional and intellectual connection a team of employees has for the mission and goals of their team, coworkers, leaders, or department, that in turn influences how they apply additional discretionary efforts to their work as a team. So we took the definition of engagement and for individuals, and we broadened it to include the definition for engaged teams. So the first part of our session today is looking at the critical elements that need to be in place for highly engaged teams to thrive. And before we go to our first slide, I'd like to ask Amy to give us our first polling question.
Thanks, Robyn. And if the webcast team can pull the first polling question, that'll be greatly appreciated. And before we start, I want to address a question from our attendee, Gloria. Is this report available to download on the Conference Board website? The answer is yes. If you go to a website and click Human Capital and Employee Engagement, you will be find the report as well as the other derivatives. Thank you for your interest in the report. So our first polling question is, what is the most important quality of a highly engaged team? So we give 5 options here: cooperation, integrity, trust, purpose, and listening to ideas. And we'll give our audience 20 seconds to respond and see some.
So while we're waiting for that, Komari, what would you think is the most important quality of a highly engaged team? I know it's hard to choose.
I know it is hard because they're all really great ones, but I think when we think about our team members currently coming into the workforce and are in the workforce, I would say purpose, coming to work, knowing that they're making a difference and having a reason for getting up in the morning and doing what they do, I would say is probably number 1.
Okay.
Thanks, Komari.
Well, Amy, why don't you share with us what the results are?
Yeah, we'll give 3 more seconds. 3, 2, 1, and we will close the poll. So
I don't know. I don't think they are agreeing with me, Robyn.
So about 2/3.
Well, purpose came second. Trust, they thought trust was the most important. And again, it's very hard to pick only one. In our survey, we actually asked people to pick 5. So it's perhaps not fair to ask you all to just pick one. But very interesting just to see the importance of trust. And if we now go to the back to the slides, you'll see the results of our survey.
If the web, great.
Which are that purpose was number 1 for the leaders, for the supervisors, for the employees, and in aggregate. So, Komari, that appears our surveys agreed with you, our survey respondents, but trust came in second. So the interesting thing here is just to see that the supervisors put cooperation higher than integrity and trust. I thought, if you think about it from the perspective of a supervisor, what do they need? They really need cooperation. But it's very interesting to look on the sides of that the leaders believe that purpose, trust, cooperation, and integrity are important. And the employees believe that purpose, trust, cooperation, integrity, and then listening to ideas. So it was the same responses from the leaders and the employees. just a little bit different for the supervisors, which, sort of makes sense, I guess.
It does. It does. And I also see that the fifth was treatment for supervisors.
I'm sorry, Kamari, say that again?
It says treatment is 5.
Yes.
For supervisors. So I think that's interesting as well, depending on the particular work that they're doing in the supervisor space of how they're treating their team members.
Well, and it was interesting that the employees didn't put treatment higher then from the same perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So then our next research slide is around what are the most important qualities of a highly engaged team leader. And there's a little bit more discrepancy here among the different audiences, but we'll start out with the leaders. They thought that the most important thing was effective empowerment and delegation, followed by trust and integrity, then a clear strategic direction, transparent and clear communication, and then rewards and recognition. Whereas the supervisors thought that transparent and clear communication was the most important, followed by trust and integrity, then effective empowerment and delegation. So they actually believe that rewards and recognition and strong relationships among team members were that the team leader had strong relationships with the team members. So that's very interesting there as well, that one came up. Again, if you look at the employee ones, it's a different order. They put transparent and clear communication first. They ranked it first, and like the supervisors did. And so in this case, the employees for the first 4 are much more like the supervisors as opposed to the last one that we looked at, where the employees were more like the leaders. So, it's important for us to look at this. It's interesting to sort of think about perhaps what the differences that are here. I just wanted to share with you one of our case study, one of the quotes that said, in terms of relationships, it says, one team leader spoke of their relationship-based team culture. We are highly focused on relationships. We work with people and we need to get buy-in. We must know how to relate to our people and create that buy-in. So even while strong relationships may not have been listed for the top 5 for leaders and employees, it was definitely high. But it's also important to be thinking about how are you going to get the buy-in as a leader with your team, and how are you going to then lead that team. So I'd like to turn it over to Komari to share with us a little bit about what Quicken Loans has been doing.
So it's interesting. It's interesting that we just talked about trust, building relationships, communication, transparent and clear communication. And so at Quicken Loans, what we do in as part of our leadership development program is we've developed what we call the ante to lead. And every team member and leader in the organization are made aware of what the antes are. We actually, during our onboarding process for our team members during their first day, there is an ante to lead section. And the reason that we do that is because we want to inform our team members of what they should be expecting from their leaders in terms of these antes. And those antes are in parallel to some of the things that we've identified in the study that you all did, Robyn, driving the culture, developing people, building trust, thinking strategically, and communicating effectively. And from team leader up through our executive board, those antes start to become a bit more complex and intricate in terms of what they mean, but the basic foundation is the same. And so for us, it is core to who we are, and our executive board really calls these the isms for leadership. And if you know anything about our culture, we have our principles, our guiding principles that we have within our organization, and there are 19 of them that every team member is expected to aspire to and live up to. When it comes to the antes, we have those same expectations for our leaders. What we have found in doing this, where we're informing the team member from the very first day, and threading this through the development opportunities and in our coaching conversations and our performance reviews, that it becomes easier for our leaders to actually live these ANSIs and work on them diligently every day. And so, and one other bit of feedback and insight for the folks who are viewing this right now is when we created these ANSIs to lead, we actually created a leadership council at the time that was made up of our executive leaders as well as team members and mid-level leaders in the organization to identify what was going on in the organization and what was important to the longevity of the organization at the time, and where we were strong at and where we had opportunities. And so these ANSIs were born collectively out of that ability for us to collaborate across the organization to develop them. And back to you, Robyn.
All right. So we're going to actually ask the audience to do our next poll. So Amy, you can pull that up for us.
So our second polling question is about team members. What is the most important quality of a highly engaged team member? And 5 options. First is transparent and clear communication. Second, inspiration and engagement. Third, trust and integrity. 4, strong emotional intelligence and ownership spirit. Again, we'll give audience about 30 minutes to respond.
Maybe 30 seconds.
Sorry. Yeah.
Before we lose everybody. But Komari, you're a leader at Quicken Loans.
Yes.
And so if, what would you pick? If you could pick the most important quality of a highly engaged team member, what would you pick as a leader?
I literally just had a conversation about this as I was getting prepared for this. I would say an ownership spirit is the most important quality. I want a team member that's going to own it, that feels empowered, that just gets in there and runs with it.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah. We are seeing responses coming in, and 3 more seconds. 3, 2, 1, close the poll.
Okay, terrific. And it looks like you can see the results. Inspiration and engagement came in first. The second was an ownership spirit. And then trust and integrity and transparent and clear communication were closely tied. Or they're not tied, but they're close. Again, it's very hard to pick just one, and I realize that. But we wanted to get the audience involved and to see how their responses compared to the responses that we found in our research. And so with that, if we could go back to the slides, I'll show you what we found in our research. Whoops, sorry, I think 2 of us did the, there we go. So looking at the research that we did on the highly engaged team members, similar to what Komari said around an ownership spirit, that did come up first for the leaders, and a little bit lower for the supervisors and employees. But look at trust and integrity. It came up second for the leaders, but first for both the supervisors and the employee. And so that's definitely higher in our survey than our respondents today, because they had inspiration and engagement just a little bit lower than that. So I think it's interesting to see under the leaders, they also think that strong emotional intelligence is really important. And, everyone probably heard people talk about EQ and measure your EQ, sort of the softer side of some of the more practical qualities that people can have, but definitely think that, it's interesting just to see how important that was to the leaders. And then the transparent and clear communication, whereas the supervisors and the employees are like, hey, if you're not going to communicate clearly, that's definitely more important to us. And so I did just think it was interesting to see how things bounced around a little bit. If you look under the supervisors, you see they also included a shared mindset in their top 5. And they were the only group that did that. So that to me was interesting, just to think about, well, what does it mean? And it sort of goes back to the purpose that we were talking about at the very beginning of this presentation, which is that if the purpose isn't clear, that was the number one for all the groups. If the purpose isn't clear, then it's going to make it harder to get the work done. And so I think a shared mindset that around that common purpose is incredibly important.
Robyn, what stands out to me here for employee is the higher and consistent standards.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about that?
So I thought it was really interesting because accountability, and we're going to talk a little bit more about accountability later, but accountability didn't come up in the top 5 for either the leaders, the supervisors, or the employees. The closest that we got were the employees saying that the higher and consistent standards. And I think that probably comes because, as you all know from working on teams, many times the person with the least drive, the least enthusiasm, the least collaboration, the person who's least likely to meet the deadlines, they can pull the whole team down. And so if you're on a team, you really do care about making sure that the standards are clear and that accountability happens among the team. Is that sort of what you were thinking about, Mari?
Yeah, I've seen that happen. Sorry, I was getting a little bit of echo. I've seen that happen on teams where your top performers, when they see folks who are perceivably underperforming, the perception is that they're not being held to those same high expectations, or the leader doesn't appear to be consistent and equitable in the treatment of the performance on the team. And right. So I've seen teams really lean in to leadership around their expectations of elevating those standards within that team.
Yeah. Well, and one of the other interesting things that we do in the report is to talk about psychological safety. And that's something that Google did with their Project Aristotle. But that, if team members don't feel psychologically safe, they're not going to be able to collaborate as much, to trust each other as much, to have that ownership spirit that we thought was so important. So definitely check that out in the report if you're interested in learning more about psychological safety. All right, so with that, I want to share just a few things that didn't come to the top, but that we thought you would find interesting. So I don't have a slide coming up on my, okay. So the slides are completely blank for me. Technology is hard at work. Amy or Komari, can you see the slides?
Yes, we are on the slides, other crucial characteristics.
Okay. Okay, so you're on that slide. I'm just going to ask you, Amy, then to forward the slides, since for whatever reason I can't see them. But so the first thing we wanted just to mention that was a crucial characteristic is setting clear roles and responsibilities. So just like we were talking about in terms of standards, it's incredibly important that team leaders set clear roles and responsibilities so that there's no confusion. And I think that that's part of the communication that we saw, the importance of the communication. And so it's definitely, I wanted to share one of the team members' comments that we had. We need to understand the change. I'd like to see more clarity of purpose in the future. How do I fit in? What's my role? And how can I contribute to and serve in this new business model? So as you can see, it's incredibly important that leaders, make sure that people understand their purpose. And part of that purpose is what their roles and what their responsibilities are. Another important thing, as I mentioned, we were going to talk about it, is holding others accountable. So it didn't come up to the top 5, but again, especially on a team, if the team isn't holding the other team members accountable, especially I guess that's something that needs to fall on the leader, is making sure that all of the team members are accountable. It's hard to stay motivated. It's hard for a team member who is motivated to sort of see the slacker in the midst. I don't know what else to call it, but and so one of the ways that I always suggest to teams is that they have a team contract and project plan, work plan, and in that work plan, they're able to list who's responsible for what, by which dates, what's contingent on other things. But also, as part of that, at the very beginning, if the team puts together a team contract, the team can decide how they are going to keep each other accountable, and what sorts of delays would be realistic. Understanding, of course, that life happens, and that as part of a team, you always need to be able to fill in for your colleagues. Just like now, I can't see the screen, so I'm not going to forward the slides. Amy's on my team, and she's going to do that for me. So, but that's just a simple example of how important it is to know that your team members have your back, and that's really only going to happen if everybody feels like everyone is being held equally accountable. The third thing is challenging the status quo and sparking innovation. And I think you would all agree that in today's very fast-paced world, change happens all the time, and innovation is one of the most important things that we can do in order to keep our businesses profitable, but also to help ourselves. Last night, I heard myself telling somebody that I had an app for that. Well, on a team, that's often where team members will share apps, the things that they found that help them and can make them be more effective. So just, what can you do on your teams, if you're the leader of the team or a member, to think about innovation and to think about how you can spark new ideas and creativity, and making sure that everyone's ideas have a chance to be listened to. So with that, did you want to add anything, Komari?
No, I was going to add to number 3, how important that is, not just in words, but also in deeds. Because I have seen team members, going back to the psychological safety that you shared earlier, is team members to feel that they don't have a voice. They can't challenge the status quo. And when you think about just in how sometimes we may brush off an idea, or we don't explain why now might not be the time, and we don't advance that discussion, the overall impact that could have on a team member, but also for leaders. Those frontline leaders are in the middle. How are we encouraging them to challenge the status quo? Because if they feel as though they're not empowered and they can't spark change, then what's going to happen with the team members that we're trusting them to lead? So it's like when we think about the future of work and where we're headed and what we're trying to do in our various industries, it is extremely important that we continue this idea of pushing forward, and also understanding that the best idea does not have to come from you just because you're the leader of that team.
And oftentimes the best idea might not come from you, because you're not as close, right? You're not as close to the content. You're not as close to the work. The other thing that what you just said sparked in me is if you do any research on catastrophic issues that have happened in different organizations, you will find that in many cases it's because team members didn't feel like they could speak up, that their voices were not heard, that they were being shut down. The team leader was playing that dictatorial role, which nobody really wants to have a dictator for a leader. But and so just if there is a problem, making sure that you're providing a safe space, that psychological safety for all of your employees to participate on that team and to feel like their voices can be heard. And even, I think, like you said, it's completely appropriate for a leader to say, hey, you know what? Thank you for saying that. We will come back to that. Right now, we need to do X, Y, or Z, but we can come back to that idea in the future.
Exactly.
So, all right, Amy, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. This is a graphic that we wanted to show you to sort of summarize what are the qualities, the essential elements that a team must have. And you can see that there's 5 essential elements. And we've talked about all of these. We've talked about purpose. We've talked about trust. We've talked about cooperation. We've talked about integrity, and we've talked about ideas and just, how important all of those are. But I wanted to share this with you in case this might be a slide that you want to share with your teams or have as a poster on the wall to sort of say, okay, guys, if we want to be to drive that team culture of an engaged team, then here are some things that we should just remember and keep at the forefront. So I wanted to share this slide with you. Komari, before we go on to the next section, anything you'd like to add?
Nothing other than the fact that I really like this graphic, and I agree that it speaks to engaged teams. And as I was looking at it, I started to think, why don't I have this up out on our walls with our teams? So I'm going to make that happen this week.
Oh, terrific. And when I come to visit you in Detroit, then you can show it to me.
I will.
All right. Okay, so our next slide is basically because we're going to shift directions slightly here, and we're going to talk about what organizations can do to create and then sustain highly engaged and highly performing teams. So, Amy, if you wouldn't mind bringing up our next polling question, we want to get some information from the audience.
Sure. Sorry, my tablet is not working, but I can read the polling questions.
Okay.
So I hope the attendees can see the polling question. So what?
I can see that. Actually, I couldn't see the slides, but I can see the polling question.
So what is the most valuable practice to support engagement in the future? The first one is recognize highly engaged teams through rewards recognition. Second, include ability to lead teams as a criterion for hiring leaders. Third, develop an organizational structure that fosters team collaboration. Fourth, provide peer coaching or mentoring opportunities to help develop desired team behaviors. And the last one is focus on teamwork as a core competency or measure in performance management. Again, 20 seconds to respond.
Okay, so Komari, I bet you know what's coming. What do you think is the most valuable practice to support engagement in the future? And so we're going to share the results of this with, sort of what's the most important in the current day and what's most important in the future. So we thought we'd ask folks what they thought would be the most important in the future. What do you think?
Oh, it's so hard, but I am going to go with develop an organization structure that fosters team collaboration for 100.
Okay. I think you're in good company.
Finally.
Yeah.
You want to go ahead and close the poll,
Yes,
Amy?
I'll give 3 more seconds.
Oh, I'm just so fast.
Yeah, we can close the poll now.
3, 2, 1. All right, perfect. Well, so as you guys can see, you all agree with Komari in saying that develop an organization structure that fosters team collaboration is the most important, and it's by far, that's what you guys believe is the most important. Focus on teamwork comes in at 16% or almost 17%, and then provide peer coaching or mentoring comes in at 14%. So it may not surprise you, but if you could go to the next slide, our research showed something slightly different. And so as you can everybody can see the slides, Komari,
Yes.
Amy?
Yep.
Okay. So you can see that our data here is split into 2 categories. On the left, we have what's the most valuable practice now, and then what's the most valuable practice in the future. And the most important one for now is communicate the role of the team in fostering a culture of engagement. And if you're saying, but that wasn't on our list of options, that's because if you look at the right-hand column, communicate the role of the team is actually very low in our research for the future. So it's an interesting thing to think about, that teams aren't going to stay static, number one. Number two, perhaps the people who were filling out the survey were more optimistic that that communication would have already happened, that it would be more of a given, that they don't need to do it. But it's still a big issue today. So it's just something to keep in mind, that if you haven't communicated the role of the team in your organization, then that's possibly something that leaders need to be thinking about doing and making sure that it's really, really clear to everyone. The second most important for the current is actually the most number one in the future, which is around peer coaching. And when I was working on this section, I had never really heard of peer coaching. So I did a little bit of research on it, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It's two people on a team who are peers, who enter into an agreement to be coaches to each other and to listen to each other, to share ideas, to provide coaching for each other. And as I was thinking about it, I actually did this at one of my previous organizations. We didn't call it peer coaching, but someone had been promoted. And so I just thought, you know what, I can come alongside this person and answer their questions. But we didn't just talk for like the first 6 months. We actually kept the relationship going for a couple of years, where we met every week and we just shared what was going on. And what was so funny was that oftentimes when I would be frustrated, my peer would have ideas and really good suggestions. Similarly, when she was frustrated or didn't know how to react, I was able to help her out. So we used to laugh that, you know, basically on every call, one of us would have an issue and the other would help us with it, and we would go back and forth. So that was something that happened naturally, but I think that organizations might want to think about, you know, encouraging their teams to enter into that. The third most important for right now is to develop an organization structure. So that is actually moving. That one actually stays where it is in the future. But I do believe that it is incredibly important, as the rest of you do, and so glad that it's on there. Interesting, number 4 for current, recognize highly engaged teams through rewards and recognition. It actually moves up in the future to number 2 from number 4. So, hey, if you're not rewarding and recognizing individual team members or the whole team, it's definitely something to be thinking about. It's very important. And then last but not least, stays the same for the current and the future, focusing on teamwork as a core competency and making sure that the team is just working well together. So that is those are the most valuable practices to support engagement now and the future. Apparently we have a question, Komari, if you want to go ahead and answer or ask it and then answer it. Or was the question for me? Sorry,
Yeah, so Robyn,
No, I was just...
so the question is, how were the practices of the future determined to support engagement?
So we literally did what you just saw. We asked the survey respondents to rank order their top responses for how to support teams now, and then what they thought it would be most important to sustain those teams in the future. So we literally asked they had the same choices.
Yeah, so just to add a little bit on that, we gave them 15 choices in total, and other options include like action planning, teams on team engagement related topics, tie total compensation to team's engagement, and provide team building activities, things like that. So these are what you have seen on the slide are the top 5 for now and future. So,
for now and the future, right? All right, so if you would go to the next slide, wanted to let you know what the top 3 most effective practices are. So in this section, we actually asked the survey respondents, so what are the top practices that are the most effective? And it's very interesting because the most important ones are not always the ones that are the most effective. So these were the ones that were the most effective. First of all, organization-wide communication to promote team engagement. Well, that makes sense because we saw that was listed as number 1 on the list of important qualities to sustain team engagement. And so 78% said that they thought that was effective and clearly it's important, as we saw. Offering engagement initiatives within the team. That was the second most high at 74. And when we think about what those team engagement initiatives are, think about, what are you doing with your teams? Are you allowing them to have team events? One organization that we surveyed actually allows their team members to pick which charities the whole organization will support, and then they are able to volunteer their time, and then the money any money that's raised will go to those charities. So the employees are actually choosing how the foundation dollars are used and how the money that's raised goes. But there's some low cost things. You can do a theme day. I know some organizations will do that with their teams, and people come in wearing costumes. You could do a chili cook-off. It's very low cost, or a potluck. Just trying to provide different ways for the people on the team to connect and to build that engagement. So think about those. And then the third one is to provide team learning and development programs. And that's really important from the perspective of, teams that can learn together, like literally have a class together. They will be able to bond during that team session, that learning session. And so don't just focus on individual trainings. Think about what trainings are available. If the organization has an organization-wide training, have the team do it together. Sit in the same room, do it together, and there'll be a sense of camaraderie, a sense of bonding. The team can all roll their eyes at the same time, that sort of thing. But it's just really important. It's one of the most effective ways to get teams to come together. So now we wanted to hear about how Quicken Loans is actually helping their teams to be more engaged and some of their effective practices. So Komari, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Robyn. So the first thing that I want to talk about is what we call My Voice. And essentially, it's this model of continuous feedback, continuous listening, and continuous action. And I want to make put a stamp on continuous action. I know many of you have probably been talking about or doing pulse surveys or scope surveys and census surveys and all of those things. But if there's no action put behind how you're gaining the information from the team members, from their feedback, then it's moot. It's essentially useless, and it's actually counter to what you're trying to do in the organization. And so a few of the things that we have created in our organization that contribute to this idea of My Voice are our annual census, which is called The Outlet. But we also do pulsing quarterly for our team members. We do stay and exit interviews. We also do continuous surveying for onboarding purposes to ensure that the team member's experience is consistent to our promise to that team member before they actually said yes to the offer. In addition to that, we do leadership roundtables where team members have the opportunity to meet with leaders throughout the organization and just to share insight, feedback, ask questions. We have what's called Zupdate, and that's done monthly, where leaders and team members are live streamed, where we're talking about what's going on in the organization to create some two-way dialogue. And then Q&A with Jay is about an hour to an hour and a half live streamed, where team members are encouraged to ask questions of our CEO. It's in a very relaxed environment, and those are publicized across the organization. And so you're able to ask questions of our CEO in real time. There are questions that we take beforehand, but there are also questions that he will answer as they come up in front of a live audience, which creates that authenticity that we want to convey and ensure that our team members understand, so they get that real talk. We also do office hours. And so the office hours are a host of us across the organization that carve out several hours out of every month where team members can sign up to meet with us one-on-one and come and talk to us about whatever is going on in a private and safe environment, going back to that psychological safety. Because we know sometimes team members don't always feel comfortable talking to their direct leader or peer, and so we give a different avenue. The cheese factory, I think, is really cool because it's a mechanism that we use where team members can present ideas through a platform and make suggestions of things that they think we could do better, we could improve on, we could innovate on. Those can be very small ideas to huge ideas in terms of, hey, we should create this company. And then we also have storytelling, which allows team members to share their stories across the organization. We do that through our team member resource networks, which is the TMRN you see in front of you. But we also do that through what's called Q Talks, where team members are encouraged to be open and to be vulnerable, and leaders to share their stories and their experiences with their peers across the organization. And so for us, when we talk about my voice, it's understanding that there are various avenues in which we can engage our team members and listen to them and to take action. They don't always have to be the standard surveys that we do. You're getting insights and feedback from team members all the time. And what that does is it raises the level of engagement when you're actually involving them in the process and getting them into the organization, but also taking action as appropriate when they're giving you tangible feedback on how you can improve their experience. And so with that, Robyn, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Komari. And Amy, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide.
We are on the next slide.
Komari, I really love you sharing the stories from your organization, and I'm going to ask you in a minute for some more. But so remember I told you guys that some of the most valuable practices are not actually very effective, so we wanted you to see this. And maybe some of you are shaking your heads in agreement here that the first one is to recognize engaged teams through reward and recognition. You can see that only 54% of the organizations we surveyed said that that was an effective practice. And that was on our list of our top 5. Again, provide peer coaching opportunities. Number 2 for us now in terms of the current, and it'll be number 1 in the future. And only 52% of the organizations said that they were effective and using that. So clearly there's a lot of room for improvement. Similarly, developing an organizational structure that fosters team collaboration. This was actually the one that everyone on today's call decided was the most important, and yet only 52% of the organizations are doing it effectively. So definitely an area that people should be thinking about working on. And then the one that's my personal favorite on this list, and this would cause me and maybe many of you to roll your eyes, is the one around the performance management process. There's been a lot going on in recent years around performance management processes. Some organizations have gotten rid of it altogether. Some organizations have gotten rid of rankings, and ratings. Some organizations are doing, as Komari was just saying, more continuous listening and continuous feedback. But it begs the question of how do you determine the performance management process of team members and to make sure that they stay accountable. And only 37% of the respondents that we spoke to said that that was an effective practice in their organization. So very clearly something that organizations need to focus on more and be thinking about. So with that, Komari, I'll turn it over to you to share a little bit more about some of your different engagement practices at Quicken Loans.
Sure. What you see in front of you is our platform, our learning platform that's called The Journey. And so it's set up with this idea that every team member that comes into our organization is on a journey. And we believe in development for all, from the very first day. And so some of the ways that we are able to do that is with some of these programs. Leading Yourself is approximately an 18-month program that every team member is auto-enrolled into. And the program is timely as it builds competencies around our values that are important and how to live those values in the organization. And it's also helped to be a culture acclimator. And then team development. And we talked about this earlier. Robyn talked about this earlier. One of the things that I think that we do that's unique for Quicken is that a team is able to sign up for development classes. And so we do sessions around the art of feedback. We do sessions around conflict resolution, the behaviors of a team. And what we have identified is when those teams go through this together, they have they establish norms and standards, expectations, common language amongst each other that they can hold each other accountable to. Our Aspiring Leaders program is for high potentials within the organization that have identified that they want to move into leadership. And then the Red Door Project is a mentorship program that we have set up for our junior leaders who've been leaders within the organization for 1 to 4 years. And they're paired up with senior leaders in the organization. Serves two purposes, more than two purposes, but two that I'm going to talk about right now, is it helps them to connect with our more senior leaders who have had greater experiences within the organization. It also provides insight to those senior leaders who if they have been a long time since they've been in the seats of our frontline leaders. And so we're able to innovate and evolve practices and a lot of things that have come out of the Red Door Project as a result of the growth partnerships between those two populations. And then Leader to Leader is a program that we've established for those leaders who are in the vice president level and above, where there is group coaching, peer-to-peer coaching, as well as some classroom sessions and experiential learning. And the feedback that we've received on that program is they appreciated it because it was different than the standard leadership development program. It's a program designed to develop the individual and really challenge that leader to think about their why they are here, why they're in leadership, and how they're actually leading as a person, not just within the organization, but with their families and in their communities. And so the feedback that we've seen is that it is shown that we are extremely committed to investing in the individual, and it gives those leaders a greater sense of purpose and how they lead their teams on a daily basis. Robyn?
All right, well, thank you. Yeah, well, we're coming up on the end here, and I want to leave time for at least one question. So, Amy, if you'd go to the next slide, what else is needed to build engaged teams? Well, you know, some of these you guys are going to just say, oh, yeah, these are definitely needed. First of all, face-to-face interaction. It allows team members to give and receive regular feedback and make those interpersonal bonds stronger. So the more opportunities you can provide for face-to-face interaction, and if you have a virtual team, think about using video. It's a little bit of a shock to the system sometimes for people who are used to conference calls, which seem a little bit more remote, but you can really get to know people if you're using video on a regular basis, and it really helps make the miles between virtual team members seem smaller. The second on this list is dedicated time for team engagement. Cannot stress that enough. It's really important that you try to build engagement by providing opportunities for the team to bond and to do things together, either learning or fun events. And I actually believe all teams should have a budget for engagement. And so sort of for some of those softer things, even if it's as silly as bringing donuts to a meeting once a week, do something.
Hello? Yeah. So sorry, our audience. I think Robyn lost her video, and we are at the top of the hour, so we will skip our polling question, jump to our the final topic about measurement. So as you see from the slides, we can see that most organizations use employee engagement survey results to measure their team engagement, followed by employee turnover and customer satisfaction. And fewer use business results like revenues and employee performance or team reputation. So we have a question about how to engage international teammates who may not sit where we sit. I think Robyn actually touched base on that by saying that leverage technology as well as build intentional time for in-person events. So thank you everyone for attending today's webcast, and thanks Kamari for joining us and sharing the great insights and stories. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And I'd just like to share a bit more about upcoming TCP events. The first is the next Human Capital Watch webcast. So we held on May 15th, 2019 at 11 a.m. Eastern. My colleagues Rebecca Ray, EVP of Human Capital, and Chuck Mitchell, Executive Director, Knowledge Content Quality, will discuss the future of work trends in Asia. So for those of you who are interested in employee engagement experience, here's another great opportunity for you. So our annual Employee Engagement Experience Summit will be held on November 14th to 15th in McLean, Virginia. The event will take place at the Hilton Hotel. So Virginia is also the home to the Hilton headquarters, which, as many of you may have known, that Hilton was ranked as #1 this year in Fortune's 100 Best Company to Work For list. So you will hear great stories from Hilton and other engaged organizations. So thank you again for joining us today, and we'll encourage you to share with us your feedback and suggestions on today's program. Look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.